Thank you, Mr. Michael.
Hey, God bless you guys. God bless you
Thank
all.
you.
Bless you guys.
All right,
I'll see you at
everybody have a
9 a.m.
Give Leonard our prayers and blessings over there.
I
Too.
will.